So today we're going to cover the new Trimble Access module covering pipeline surveying. Start off with, let's go over the data sheet to just cover some of the main points about this new module within Trimble Access. So as you can see here on the screen, some of the key features involve the merging of pipeline tally data with pipeline joint mapping data and as-built data. The purpose of this is to streamline data flow and also to allow the merging of data from multiple crews. Let's scroll down here to the second page and kind of go over some of the features. So in terms of pipeline tally, you can record positions, times. You can also track pup joints by recording the joint ID on the joint. You can record information at that time, which will streamline the process as you move on to joint mapping. Joint mapping, you can record the weld ID in the joint ahead and the joint behind. Both of these features allow for reporting straight out of the data cutter or from Trimble Business Center software. The third portion of the pipeline surveying module would be the as-built data collection. At this point, you can record a shot with a feature code weld, then specify the weld ID, and the information you've already previously recorded during the pipeline tally and the joint mapping is automatically populated, thereby streamlining the process. And as I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, multiple crews can merge their data, either tally data or joint mapping data, into a master CSV file. That CSV file can be quickly merged together by a technician or a crew coordinator and then resent to the crews for the next day's field work. Let's move on to, so what we've seen here before I jump ahead is the actual data sheet for the pipeline module within Trimble Access. This will be available at the end of the presentation. Let's move on to the actual help file. What I'd like to start off with is just a brief explanation of how this software ties things together. So what you see here on the screen are the three features of this process. So we'll start with the tallying of the pipe as it's laid out along the ditch. The crew could go out and record the unique joint ID. They could also record customizable information. You can see here length, diameter, heat number. So they simply walk along the trench recording this information. They can record positions using the GPS within the TSC3 or tablet controller. That can be exported out to Google Earth, or they can choose not to record positions, but either way they eliminate paperwork. Once they've recorded the tally file, they can move on to joint mapping. You can see here once the pipe is on the blocks welded next to the trench, they can record that unique weld ID and specify what's the joint behind and what's the joint ahead. That information is automatically populated, and again at this time they can record a time and position that they recorded the weld. Again, this helps keep up with productivity reporting to the client or to the company itself. Third step would be the actual as-built of the pipe. Once it's welded and rolled into the ditch, the crew would record a point number, in this example 1000, code weld. When the attributes pop up, they specify what is that weld ID. Automatically the information coming from the tally file into the joint file, now into the as-built file, is auto-populated. The crew does have the option to edit this if something has changed. Notice here also that depth of cover of the pipe can be recorded if the crew's taken a natural ground shot next to each weld on the as-built survey once that pipe is in the ditch. So again, this file is the help file. It's actually a very helpful manual. You can see it's almost 60 pages long. It was developed by Trimble to go hand in hand with this new pipeline access module that's now available. So let's take a look and see how we tie all these things together. I'm going to minimize these down here. The basis of all this is two things. Really, you build a pipeline tally CSV, which we'll get to here in a minute, and then you also have a feature and attribute library. So let's go into Trimble Business Center and let's open up our feature definition manager. Once this module opens up, I'm going to simply choose to open, and I am going to go open up my Martin Instrument Pipelines FXL file. This is a very simple feature and attribute library that we put together just to kind of show how this new pipeline module works. If you have an existing feature and attribute library used, obviously you can edit it to include the needed tie togethers. The key here is you have a feature code called weld. It has certain attributes. Once you load this into the data collector as an FXL file, you need to have an additional feature code that is called tally. This will allow the software on the data collector to recognize that it needs to look for information from a feature code of tally and then merge it with a feature code of weld. So you can see here we've created attributes that are pretty much the same. The key ones here are really the weld ID, the joint behind, and the joint ahead. And if you notice on both of these, they have those three attributes associated with the feature code. Of course, once you get done creating this, if you have a data collector connected up to Trimble Business Center, you can obviously save the file. You can also simply export here and upload to device, and it will be automatically uploaded to the correct location on the data collector. So that will cover the feature and attribute portion within TBC. So now let's go back to take a look at that little CSV file I mentioned earlier. So let's open it up and I can show you what we've done here. This is an option to kind of streamline things or maybe standardize things. So within your company, you might want to specify that as the tally and joint mapping proceeds in the field, what column headers do you want? Because basically, say in the past, you might have loaded an Excel file onto the TSC3 or tablet, and the crews needed to input this information into these cells. The way the Trimble Access module works is when we define column headers, these will now be fields that the crews can input on the data collector instead of having to zoom in on an Excel spreadsheet on the small data collector screen and input it. It just makes the data input much easier and more streamlined. You can see here for our sample tally CSV file, we created simple column headers, joint ID, length of pipe, size of pipe, coating, wall thickness, X-ray ID, weld ID, degree of bend. You can go on and on depending on what the client requires. So once we've created our little CSV file on our computer, we need to get it to the data collector just like we loaded the feature and attribute file onto the data collector from TBC. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this CSV, and if you notice I already have a TSC3 connected to my computer at the current time. So I'm simply going to copy that CSV file, and I'm going to browse onto the data collector. So I'm going to go into the storage on the data collector. I'm going to go into Trimble Data. And now at this point, you'll notice a new folder. In the past, you had your company's folder and you had system files folder. Now with the pipeline module within Trimble Access, you get this new folder called Common. If I open that up, I have a tally folder. The tally folder is going to include the files that are created once you begin pipeline tally and joint mapping. I'm going to paste my CSV file here. I've already got a copy, so I'm actually going to skip over that. The reason I like to paste it out here, it's going to become clear as we proceed with this presentation, but I like to paste a template out here. And as the crew begins each day of work, they can rename this file, copy it into the tally folder, and then the new files are created on a daily basis. So we've already got it at the location. Again, we're still within our Trimble data directory, but instead of putting it in your company's Trimble Access folder or in system files, you go into this new folder and paste it out here. Again, if you want to paste it in tally folder, that's fine, but you would have to do that on a daily basis, or the crew would have to recreate the CSV on a daily basis. So since we're talking about this tally folder, let's go back to the help file and see which files are created at that directory. So I'm going to jump ahead and go to the section of the manual that covers the file types. So we've already talked about the tally CSV. This is the file we create and put onto the data collector that will populate the fields that are available to enter in as the crew is doing pipeline tally. You also have multiple other files, a DFN, an IDX, a map file, and an XML. These are all new file types, but they all will have the exact same name, kind of like the example I was saying earlier. So if I had the name of my tally.csv file was tally1, I would end up with a file that was called tally1dfn, tally1idx, tally1.map, tally1.xml. These files are all separate from the job file, but bear in mind the information that's recorded within these files is also recorded in the job file on the TSC3. So now that we've kind of touched on that, if you want just to kind of highlight, I'll open this up. You see where we've already kind of done some work. Just like I was saying, the CSV file will also have each one of these files associated with it with the exact same naming convention. This is all used later on when we merge multiple crews data. So now that we've got our CSV file and our feature and attribute library loaded onto the data collector, let's move on to the data collector itself. So I'm going to open up a sync screen. For this presentation, I'm going to work through some of the features on the pipeline module, and we will then move outside. So let's start off with, we are at the Trimble Access menu here within the TSC3. So the first thing is, if I wanted to rename that file, the crew would simply need, and by file I mean the tally.csv, the crew would need to go into the files, and they'd need to go into the common directory. Then I see my pipe tally CSV. I can simply press and hold on it and say copy, and I can press and hold and say paste, and now I can press and hold and say rename. So let's say that the name of the job is Sal, and it's the year 14/11/11, and I'm crew MM. I can enter that. Now I can simply cut that. Oops, I accidentally opened it. And press and hold on it. I can cut that, and I can open up my tally folder and go menu, and I can hit edit and paste. So now I've got my custom named tally CSV file within the correct directory. So now we can get back to the pipeline apps itself. So I'm going to open up the pipeline module at this time. Now notice this screen looks very similar to the general survey screen that the crews are probably used to seeing. That's because the concept of this module was to keep the learning curve low, make it very user friendly, and very familiar to the crews that are already used to using the Trimble Access software. The only extra button we notice here is tally, and there'll be some changes underneath the jobs. So let's start off by going under jobs. I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to create a new job. Exactly like in general survey, I'm going to call it just today's date, I guess, 14/11/11 mm. You can use your templates just like you always have been able to in general survey. It'll of course remember your last coordinate system settings. You need to go ahead and tell it what feature library you want. So I'm going to tap on that. I'm going to choose that Martin Instrument Pipelines, and I'm going to hit accept. Everything else on that screen is the same, but now there's a new step. Once I've defined my job settings just like normal, I need to go back underneath jobs, and instead of going to properties job, you have a new feature down here called pipeline options. So I'm going to open that up so we can take a look at it. So one of the features of this software is you could have a pipeline alignment file. This could be an RXL file, a shape file, things like that. I'm not going to touch on that for today because I don't have an alignment file, but you can see here that is a feature. You just specify what the file's location on the TSC3, and you can do corridor limits, left, right, slope stationing, and so on and so forth. I'm going to page down to the second page. So this is where I define which tally CSV file I am going to use for this job. So I'm going to browse onto the directory within the TSC3, and I'm going to look for that file I created, which was this LaSalle 141111mm. I'm going to tell it that's the one I want to use, and then I'm going to double check these fields. Unique joint ID. If you look here, you can see these were the column headers of that tally CSV file, if you remember that. So yes, it is joint ID. The joint length, that is correct, it is length. Now you can specify minimum pup length. So this is for tracking pup joints in the field. I'm just going to say 1 foot. And then I'm going to touch on the length attributes. You remember at the beginning of the presentation, this is how you tie the tally, the joint mapping, and the as-built together. So I'm going to come in here and notice these column headers is attribute, code, and link. So the key links here are the joint ahead, and you can see what I'm doing here is just clicking on these and it toggles through the options. Let me toggle through them all so you can kind of see them. And weld, and we're back to none. So I'm going to keep clicking on this till it says joint behind. Then I'm going to scroll down and I am going to specify that the weld ID is the weld. And then I'm going to hit OK. But remember at the beginning of the presentation, when we do the tally, we have the joint ID. So that's why we're specifying joint ahead, joint behind, and we have the weld ID. Once we record these information during the tally and joint mapping, this information will be auto-populated when we proceed with the as-built of the pipeline. So I'm going to hit OK here. And if you notice, if I page down to this next page, you can see it's already got joint ahead, joint behind, and the previous screen had the weld ID. You can also choose to compute pipe cover. I'm going to say yes to that. And if you had a train model, you could specify that to compute elevations. There's several different options for cover type. I'm going to choose fixed minimum. You can see there was another option there from CSV file. I'm going to page down and I'm going to say minimum cover is 4 feet. So I'm just going to enter in 4 there. Exclusion zone files is if you had shape files or DXF files, you could specify zones the crew should not be in because the landowner did not give permission. I'm going to skip over that part just for time's sake. And you can see down here, since I selected that I do want the depth of cover, I can tell it, hey, which field is that? Again, I have this defined as an attribute for the weld and the tally feature code. So I'm going to specify that. You can also specify station offset if you have an alignment file selected. So I'm going to hit accept to that now that I've got my pipeline options set up to how I'd like to proceed in the field. And I'm going to go straight into tally. So again, this example would be the pipe is strung out next to the ditch, but it is not welded together. So going into tally, I'm going to go to create tally. So just to keep things simple, I'm going to specify that the joints are named sequentially with an easy point number range just for simplicity's sake. So I'm just going to say this is joint 1000. I'm going to say the length is 25 feet. I'm going to say the size is 12 inches. I'm going to say the coating is FBE. I'm going to say the wall thickness is 250 millimeters and no degree of bend. So notice there's a record position on the screen. So this is where, without having an R8 or R6 or GPS out there on the pipe, the crew could be out there and they could record a position using the GPS within the TSE3. So let me show you how you would do that to turn that GPS on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Windows menu by hitting the top leftmost button on the keyboard of the TSE3. So now I've accessed the Windows menu. I'm going to scroll down here to the very bottom and go to SAT Viewer. So now I'm going to go to the tab here, and you can see it's already there for the GPS, and I'm going to say Connect to GPS. So by doing this activates the GPS, the internal GPS within the TSE3 or the tablet. Okay, so you can see it came up with lat long. This may or may not work so good because I'm actually in the office, but I'll go ahead and give it a try. So now I'm going to X out of there. I turn the GPS on. Yeah, and she just said no signal. So that's just how you turn it on. If you want to try and take a shot, if you're outside, obviously this works fine. You could hit record position. Actually, it did pop in with position. Now, another time saver here on this screen is that as the crew's going along tallying pipe, some of these fields might be the same for every single joint of pipe. So you might want to define that, hey, some of these are defaults. So if you notice down here at the bottom, I have a defaults button. I can click on that defaults button and I can say, listen, the size is going to be the same for each piece. The wall thickness is going to be the same, and so is the coating, because it's all about the same manufacturer. So when I hit accept to that, notice I come back to that field. Those fields are now highlighted in orange. It's a little hard to see on the screen, but this field, and this field are now orange. Now, also, say that tally CSV file, I didn't have one when I get to the screen. This is where the crew could create one on the fly out in the field by using this file button here at the bottom. I can hit file here, and I can hit continue and watch what happens. It'll say, as a tally CSV file contains only column headings without data because I haven't collected anything. Do you want to modify the column names, which will create new fields? I'm going to say yes. So now I can specify which one of these column file names I want to move up or down or delete, and I can also add new ones by clicking on the select library attribute, and I can look through, and it's basically looking at all the attributes for the feature codes I have in my feature and attribute library. I'm going to hit escape here. I just wanted to show you that it can be done, and escape back, and escape back, and we're back to where we're at. So second page down here, you can see it would record station, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to go ahead and hit add, and notice it goes up sequential point number. These fields stay the same because I specified them as default. I'm going to input the length of the pipe. If there was a bend, I could put degree of bend. I could record position. I'm going to hit enter and add, and just continue down the line here. I'm just going to take a few sample data collections here, and then we'll proceed on to joint mapping. And add that, and this will be second to last. And there we go. So I'm going to say add. Now, one key thing here, as the crew is working throughout the day, you have to periodically hit save. It doesn't auto save this data. So if there was some kind of major catastrophe with the data collector, you could possibly lose data. So that is one key thing about this module you might want to recommend to your crews to save on a regular basis. Now that I'm done with my 5 shots, I'm going to hit simply save, add the currently displayed joint data, yes. So data saved file, okay, and I can escape out of here, and I've now done my tally. So you can go back into tally, and if you needed to check tally, you can come back here and check tally. You can also make various tally reports. Let's take a look at those. So you can do joint details.csv, a report, a KML file, as I mentioned earlier, joints KML. So again, as you're tallying along, you could, if you took your positions with your TSE3, you could send this file back to the office. They could look at it on Google Earth and get a bird's eye view of productivity. Same thing with joint mapping. I'm going to go ahead and escape out of there. And let's go into the joint mapping itself. So I'm going to open up joint mapping, and again, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to use sequential weld IDs. So I'm going to start here with 2000. And the method, you have 3 options: welds, loose ends, or bends. I'm going to keep it on welds. And the joint ahead here will be 1001. And the joint behind will be 1000. Now you can change direction here by simply toggling this arrow, but I'm going to keep it in this direction, which would be, I guess, downstream. Again, here, as you're going along the welded pipe on blocks next to the ditch, recording the weld IDs, you can record positions for those KML reports I just showed you. I'm not going to do that again because I'm in the office. You can record notes here if you need to, but I'm going to hit add and joint map ID 2000 added. Notice how it went up sequentially. You can choose that by using this arrow here. You can also have options down here on the joint mapping screen. Warn a joint not found in tally file. Excuse me. Default next joint ID from tally. Weld ID default increasing, decreasing, no default. So just depending on which way the crew is working in the field, you have the flexibility to change those options. So notice when I put in Weld ID 2001, it is automatically populating these fields because this is from the tally file. So it knows that the next joint ID ahead is 1002 and the joint behind is now 1001. So I will just hit add to that. Okay. And notice how they're just going sequential. So I'm going to quickly just go add. Okay. And add. Okay. And again, the crews would just be walking along with TSC3 doing this. And okay. So I'm at the end there. That was the last one I recorded. So I'm going to hit save and yes. Data saved to file. Okay. And I'm going to escape out of here. So now we've just completed a pipeline tally and a joint or weld mapping survey. The next step would be to go into the actual as-built. In that case, we'd go under measure pipeline points, and specify RTK network, whatever kind of survey style we're doing. We'll need to cover that later on once we go outside. I'm going to go back there. So let's talk about getting that data out and merging it with two crews. So I'm going to close down our screen mirror software there, and I'm going to go look inside the TSC3. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to open that up, the TSC3, the storage. I'm going to go into Trimble data, and I'm going to go into my common file and into my tally file. So remember what I named that CSV file before. Let's look for that name in here. Here we go. I had called it LaSalle 141111 if you recall. So here are my files that I have. So these are the files that I would need to copy to my computer to give to a technician to merge together. Alternatively, you could use Trimble Access Services to do this. So what I'm going to do is open up a separate screen here, and what I've got is a master list and a crew. So when you're merging multiple crews' data together, you need to, it's recommended that you make some kind of directory on your computer and you have a folder called master. Within that master, you would have the, let's call it crew one's data. So you can see they all have their data here. As you want to merge additional crews, you need to make a subfolder within the master folder for each additional crew. So what I'm going to do here is make a new folder and call it crew 3. Now this probably is not going to work because I don't have the same names here, but this is again just for example to show the file structure on your computer. So now that I have crew 3 created, I'm going to go back to my data collector and I'm going to copy those files over to my computer. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to use a new little processor module that's called the Tally and Joint Mapper Updater Utility. This is a free little program that you can download from the Trimble site that basically allows you to merge together files. It's got a brief explanation up here, but what we do is we browse for where our master tally CSV file is. So we browse here. Again, where we're at here is I'm on my desktop. I've created a folder called Pipelines, Tally Joint Files. Here's Master. And so there it is because I'm into my master. I'm not in my subfolder. I'm going to specify that's it. Open. And then CSV file with new data that the crew collected today that you want to merge on the master file. I'm going to browse here. I'm going to say, hey, it's crew 3, the one I just created. I'm going to say that's the CSV file. I'm not sure this is going to work since the names aren't identical. I'm going to hit open and I'm going to hit update. Column headings to the two files do not match. So let me go back to the crew 2 one. I'm going to go folder up. These will match here. Hit open and I'm going to hit update. No updates needed. I've already merged those. So basically what would have happened there is if I close out this program, I would have my master file just got the additional tally and joint mapping data from these folders and updated it on my tally CSV, which if I open that up, you can see here, imagine this is 2 separate crews and they were tallying or joint mapping from 2 different directions on the project. Now their data is all in my master CSV file. Again, this data is also in the job file, but just showing you that part of this module's features is that the data is automatically collected in this master CSV spreadsheet.